Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. Oh, hey, friend. I'm excited. I start every episode saying I am so excited for this one. But I really am, because in my timeline, in reality, it's been a minute and a lot has happened in the last 6 weeks. August 2024 is going down as a gripe for a very long time. I think I queued this up in early April, just didn't really feel right until now, until very much now. So I can hear you going, BZ, what are we talking about today? Apologizing. Sorry, not sorry. We are going to get into the nitty gritty of why you over apologize, the damage over apologizing is doing not just to your own credibility or psyche or emotional well-being, but your relationships, your professional and impact that you can make as a leader and in business. So this isn't just about annoying me. Okay. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was absolutely inspired by that. The amount of times someone starts with an apology, sorry, ... You're not sorry. I mean, you are, but not because this is a moral or ethical conflict. There's an expectation here that is unreasonable, that you have no need to be apologizing for. And quite honestly, this is a habitual knee-jerk response that feels very meaningless and empty. It's easy to think we're just being polite. It doesn't really matter. That person was in my way or vice versa. So I'm just going to acknowledge it and move on with my life. Sure. But I'm going to talk about actually quite a bit of research in this one, only because it appears as if people don't think this matters because it happens all day, every day. And now that I'm in the South, my friend, just go to a 4-way stop and let me know how that goes for you. So again, if you find yourself over apologizing, if you feel like you're saying sorry for all sorts of things that are completely out of your control, that were unintentional, that in fact, you don't even necessarily agree with the outcome, but because someone else expects an apology, you find yourself forcibly, obligatorily, out of obligation, apologizing, this one is for you. We will get into how to make a meaningful apology. We will also talk about how apologies can be transformative, not necessarily in that order. So we're going to get into it, and I'm going to get this chip off my shoulder. So thank you for bearing with me on this one. I would love to know, do you find yourself apologizing all of the time? And since we're just getting started here, I've seen some other people doing this. I'm going to give it a go. Like, comment, share now before we get into it, before you get 3 minutes, 3 hours, you're not, who knows, into the activity that you're doing while listening. Yeah, let's see if that makes any differences. I've been getting some really great feedback, by the way, y'all. And it really, when someone you've never met and you have no connection to gives you feedback, it's a thing. So anywho, when was the last time you apologized for something you had no control over? It wasn't intentional, or it didn't really matter. The amount of apologies I get from somebody because they're responding to my text message 2 hours later or my email 4 hours later, y'all, I really hope you have something better to do than be holding your phone waiting for me so that you can get back to me within 20 seconds. Whoever set that expectation up is cray cray. And I encourage everybody to start making their own rules around that one. That is 100% my hill that I will die on. Over apologizing and meaningless apologies dilute the true power of the word sorry. And I think that one's obvious. Again, we're going to get into the layers of why this truly matters. And here's the thing. If over apologizing helped, it wouldn't be such a US centric habit. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's happening elsewhere, or why over apologizing truly is a cultural phenomena, because what that suggests is it doesn't mean you are superior, that you are morally enlightened, or that it's an effective means of communication. It's just a habit. And until we kind of bring awareness to some of the things we're doing automatically, it doesn't really give us the opportunity to potentially make a shift. So In the US, apologies are typically a social lubricant, right? We smooth over interactions. We recognize hierarchy. We avoid conflict. And Americans will preemptively apologize, even when they aren't directly responsible, because again, it's very conflict avoidant. We're diffusing tension, we're preventing misunderstandings, we're making it easier to maintain good social standing. So, while politeness can maintain social harmony, and this might be highly valued, especially more valued depending on which subsect of the United States that you're in, when we start to apologize for even minor inconveniences, it's virtue signaling, right? We're saying I'm participating in the behavior that shows up like respect for your feelings, or acknowledging that this is, again, a patterned behavior. So we go to interrupt somebody and we say sorry, and yet we still interrupt them anyway. Or, we give this little disclaimer before doing the thing that is actually harmful or negative, quote unquote, behavior. So it's almost like we're using it as an excuse to behave badly. It's layered for sure. So why does this happen more prevalently, more often in the United States? Because we are such an independent, individualistic society, right? Like when I lived overseas for a long time in a variety of different places, people would always be like, "What's up with America, man?" And I was like, "Manifest destiny, bro. It is our God-given right to do whatever the fuck we want." I'm gonna experiment with a little less swearing because I'm getting shadow banned on all of the platforms. So we've tried this before. It doesn't go well or last very long, but I just did it once. I'm really proud of myself. So celebrating every win here, walking the walk. Anywho, we take our independence very, very, very seriously. And this comes with this concept of personal responsibility. So when you do make a mistake, you are expected to take ownership of your actions. But how many times have you gotten an apology from somebody where you realize there is no ownership here? This is placating. This is essentially like kicking the bucket down the way, passing the buck, as the Aussies would say. And like it's almost more infuriating because you're just waiting for this thing to happen again. So in as much as I would love for apologies to be synonymous with accountability and self-awareness, it feels like the least accountable or aware habit that most people are engaging in. And that is anecdotal for sure. That is based on my experience. But I do get to talk to a lot of different people in a lot of different places all day long, every day. So, I'm not a meteorologist, but I'm pretty sure that makes me an expert. Here's the thing though, and this is what I mean when it starts to get really layered. And this here might be the reason that I have such a big problem with that. I would love to hear about your experiences. But in the US, studies show women apologize more than men. This is because societal expectations around gender roles suggest women need to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. That part I won't argue with, leading to more frequent apologies in interpersonal settings than men. Conversely, men apologize less because it can be seen as vulnerable or weak. So you can see how all of these things are nuanced and problematic, right? And when we recognize that this is both the societal, cultural, and gender role, again, we can start to challenge the assumed nature of this activity. Like, do I really have to apologize for replying to a text message a bit later? So what does it mean when you're over apologizing all of the time? And I know it seems harmless. I know it seems like, why are we recording a whole podcast episode about this, BZ? But hear me out. Okay. So apologizing for uncontrollable events, the common habit of apologizing for things like the weather, for traffic, or someone else's behavior, or especially when someone is really going through it, right? These apologies aren't necessary. You can empathize without sympathizing. And it creates a dynamic where you are taking false responsibility and therefore, at some level, eroding your own self-confidence. When we try to take control of something that is out of our control, it is technically impossible, right? And so doing this over and over and over again actually demonstrates to your sort of internal mechanisms, your subconsciousness, even your consciousness, that you can't fix the thing. And that that impacts your own self-confidence. There's also the next layer is the emotional labor, which I think is very much related to your own self-confidence, but boundary issues. So oftentimes when I start working with somebody, they're over apologizing. They're also really struggling to say no. And why? Because again, we're taking responsibility for things that aren't our responsibility. And excessive apologizing teaches others that your emotions and your actions are always at fault. And this blurs the boundaries between what is within your control and what isn't. So not only are you teaching yourself that you can't, you're also teaching everybody around you to not believe in you. There are studies that show over apologizing can lead to decreased self-worth, fostering a belief that one is constantly in the wrong. This is also linked to research on self-esteem and how repetitive self-depreciation directly impacts your self-esteem, your confidence, and your relationships. Now, I recognize this probably feels a little hyperbolic, a little over dramatized, but I'm going to ask you to just take a second to reflect on those people who are like, sorry this and sorry that, and saying sorry all the time. Do they rate as some of the more confident people in your experience? Okay, so now I'm going to get into this is going to be the nerd section of the podcast. And it's interesting because I used to, when I first started this podcast, I was like, I am not going to back everything up with research because that feels like I'm trying to prove something or that I don't believe in myself. But thanks to good old ChatGPT, doing research is so easy. And I am constantly amazed at the questions and answers people are getting. Anywho, I thought some of this research was pretty fascinating. And as we all know, I am a card carrying nerd. So I'm going to share it with you. Okay. And just because I also like being like studies suggest and research prevails. This one was by Lewicki and Pollan. And the role of trust in negotiation processes is the title of this particular research paper. So I wanted to also make sure that this was relevant to my listener who's probably either in business, founding a business, or, working somewhere with the dreams of doing the former. So this is important, not just in your interpersonal relationships, but 100% in your professional relationships. And if you think of your business as its own being, it 100% will affect your partnerships and the way that you engage in your community with your customer, clients, buyers, so on and so forth. So trust in negotiation is eroded when people apologize insincerely. So if you've ever been trying to reach a consensus with a group of disparate people, so you're negotiating a deal, you're trying to figure out how much something should cost, how much you're willing to pay, you're trying to get somebody to agree to do something in exchange for a certain amount, so on and so forth. When we apologize a lot, it starts to feel insincere, especially because in a negotiation process, we're apologizing knowing we disagree. So the point is not to feel bad about that. It's to work together to create a win-win-win, not lose. And apologizing is kind of like saying, hey, you're losing right now. And I'm sorry. It's going to very much impact the balance of that conversation. And when anyone's on the back foot, you're probably going to get a defensive move. So, we talk a lot about this in terms of the energetics. Like when level 2 compounds level 2, more fight is going to engage in more fight unless you're dealing with somebody who is a master negotiator, in which sense you're going to get outplayed. So this study explored how apologies impact negotiations and interpersonal trust, providing support for your point about reducing the effectiveness of apologies. So the more you apologize, the less effective they are, to the point that they become meaningless. And now you're creating this offensive defensive dynamic. And it's going to erode the process of trying to create trust. That's the point of these negotiations, is can we land in a place where we trust each other enough to move forward? So another study by Ten Brunsell and Smith Crow, Ethical Decision Making, Where We've Been and Where We're Going. Apologies made without genuine remorse can actually damage relationships more than not apologizing at all. I know you were like, I know that apologizing insincerely is bad. It's better to just not than to do it. And how many sorries have you made today that you weren't even aware that you were saying? It was literally just a pattern of speech. So this research supports that idea that an apology should be introspective and sincere to prevent negative relational consequences. So I'm going to keep going with this. I'm not going to cite everybody's name, but research in organizational behavior suggests that leaders who apologize too often create an impression of weakness. So this was a study that found that leaders who over-apologize are often perceived as less competent by employees, leading to reduced organizational morale. This is a huge culture thing in business, and we're going to get into why. But the power of a meaningful apology, which we will also get into, when a leader can apologize sincerely and with intent, it demonstrates that accountability and self-awareness that is impactful. This is a critical leadership quality. And I talk a lot about this. I've done a couple different episodes I'll link to in the show notes on leadership. And there's a level of vulnerability that is inspiring and compelling. But again, when it is our go-to tactic, it's going to lose its effectiveness. So credibility and trust are built within the team because you're fostering a culture of transparency. I'm not perfect. I don't expect perfection. I'm going to acknowledge that we attempted a strategy and it wasn't successful. We're going to try something a little bit different. Again, are you with me? That is going to get a much stronger response. So in another study of cross-cultural apology patterns, and this is within organization, we can apologize for minor social inconveniences, whereas other cultures, and think about it in terms of like engineering versus sales and service, or IT versus human resources, right? When those cultures that are not as invested in quote unquote apologizing to meet expectations, the apologies aren't taken as seriously. So for those people who are potentially more invested in soft skills, they tend to apologize a lot more because of that emotional labor and those sort of boundary maintenance activities that can feel like they're a part of the job, right? But then those people are perceived as literally being soft by the more, I don't want to say hard skills because I don't think that's how they're described, but the more analytical sort of right-brained skills, So anywho, got a little lost in the weeds there, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Read the room. And there are going to be spaces, I think, where apologies can be done properly and with intention, and it's really going to matter. There are going to be spaces where you do not need to apologize at all because the whole process is iterative and analytical. That's the point. Apologize impact customer relationships and reputation. So the risk of a hollow apology in a business, when business owners apologize, you'll see this often in reviews, right? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for your experience. Give us another chance. Okay, but how are you going to make it right? What's going to happen differently next time? And oftentimes, I've seen really powerful recognition of something not going well without an apology attached to it. One of my friends and business owners in Colorado got a really bad review about somebody's service experience in their business. That person walked in before open hours. And she said, this was a sarcastic response, but that has a lot more to do with the branding and messaging of this particular business. But she said, I'm so sorry that you're not able to read. I thought that the closed sign on the door with the hours listed for each day would have been useful. But when you entered the store and I said, we're not open, thanks, and you continued to wander around anyway, I decided I would continue doing the work that I need to do before opening in order to have a successful business. So apologies for not giving you the attention you somehow think you deserve despite walking into and essentially breaking and entering a business. I thought it was a pretty great response. So that's using an apology intentionally, but probably not the actual intention. Most apologies are made with a coffee break. Obviously, apologies in business, especially when it's customer, client, buyer facing, are very, very important. And I actually think having a policy in place is crucial. Sometimes these things can happen when you're not immediately able to solve it. And so giving your team, giving yourself a step-by-step, this is how we respond. And that's what was so great about that particular example. That owner and that business, they have a very sarcastic, very funny, very witty approach. It's across all of their social media. It's exactly the experience they create in their business. They do a lot of they've got, speakeasy in the back. They've got people coming in all day doing tastings and experiences for their customers. So, for that to all be very tongue in cheek made sense. That's not going to work for every single business. So by creating some kind of a step-by-step resource in terms of this is how we approach negative feedback, it may or may not include an apology. It may be a very scripted response so that you're creating consistency and resourcing your team. The Ritz-Carlton has a phenomenal and world-renowned service training, white glove service training program. And I recommend it to a lot of my different clients when they provide a service and they've got a large team and they're trying to scale. They empower every single employee at the most entry level to be able to make decisions and take care of their customers. And so you don't need to go talk to the manager. You don't need to get permission to fix a problem. You are empowered to do so yourself. Again, that's a different approach, where their approach is almost like if you have any kind of a challenge, issue, or problem, we solve it immediately right there. And it will very much start with an, I am so sorry this has been your experience. That is absolutely unacceptable. And then they get into the problem solving. The benefit of owning mistakes is probably pretty obvious, but when a business owner acknowledges a mistake with a meaningful apology, coupled with a commitment to change, that, my friend, right there, that is the crucial difference. It can turn a negative situation into a positive one. I think, again, we've all seen this when a business really acknowledges, hey, that's not how we do things. This is how we're going to make it right. Will you give us another chance? And they do that in a very public facing way. So whether that's, we see this happen in press releases, we see, I always think about that example with Starbucks after 9/11, and people were asking for water. Like people were just running in the street, and individual store managers were not giving away water for free. And their CEO, sorry, I just did it. Although I'm sorry for misspeaking. This is your time and energy. And I'm going to bring consciousness to my speech. Their CEO very publicly apologized and said, on the one hand, these managers were absolutely following procedure. Therefore, our procedures need to get updated. And what I will say is, as someone who's not like a huge Starbucks fan for a lot of different reasons, mainly just support your local businesses and local economies, Starbucks, my ex-partner and I used to feed homeless people, unhoused people on the major holidays because we don't really celebrate them. And so if you call a local Starbucks and you're doing any kind of a social initiative in your community, you can ask that store manager and they will give you not just coffee, but all of the accoutrement. It was by far the biggest hit. Quite a few different chain restaurants actually have the capacity for this, whereas sometimes your little local small businesses don't. So anywho, the point being, and not virtue signaling here, Starbucks absolutely rectified itself and it put its money where its mouth was. And so this egregore, this being, recognized it made a mistake, acknowledged it, explained what the change would be, and then that change was universally applied at any single Starbucks that you can go to anywhere. And so I think that is, as a business, how you grow and succeed and sustain and scaling. Let's move into apologies as culture setting tool in business. I'll put out an article on this that'll kind of get like way more into all of the research if over apologizing and its impact on you and your well-being and your team is something that you're truly interested in. So here's the ripples of change. And I work with a lot of my people on change management. And a lot of these leaders have gotten themselves into a place where they are the hero, right? They have unintentionally pedestalized themselves almost as the guru in their business. And this is for a lot of different reasons, but typically because they were a team of one and then suddenly this business blew up and they truly are the gatekeeper of all of the organizational knowledge and know-how and success strategies and scripting and customer interaction, so on and so forth, right? Once we acknowledge, I want to fire myself from that particular role and show up more as the visionary creative, the person who started this out of a passion and a desire to solve problems, to do things in a way I don't really see other people doing, or to do things in a way that I think is really special because it's the way that I do them. When we can acknowledge that in a healthy way, and by healthy, I mean intentional, curious, open to exploration, a willingness to actually try, fail, and then try again, it's probably going to start with acknowledging things didn't go right. Things aren't going right. Hey, I keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, and it's not solving the problem. So I'm going to define that as a mistake, and I'm going to own it and apologize for it. How you apologize and how you model apologies sets the tone for your entire organization. A culture where leaders and employees take responsibility for mistakes encourages problem solving and accountability. Now, again, if people are just doing this all day, every day, you're not. It's the opposite of that. So in terms of organizational culture, there was a study done by Amy Edmondson at Harvard that found leaders who own their mistakes and apologize meaningfully create psychological safety in their teams. This is a culture that fosters innovation and open communication as employees feel safe to admit mistakes and learn for the long term. So anytime I hear about leaders talking about gatekeeping or a lack of accountability, a lack of growth mindset, people aren't solution oriented, it's often not the leader. I'm by no means saying that's the leader's fault, but most people have come from a blame culture and a name, blame, shame culture where if there's a problem, it's somebody's fault. And then it's that person's problem. In my experience, most problems have multiple variables. Multiple things contribute to that one thing happening. And yes, there might be someone whose role it is to own that particular project or activity, and therefore they are ultimately responsible, but that doesn't mean it's their fault. And so there's a huge difference between saying, I'm willing to take responsibility for this, look at this, work with people, take on feedback, and construct a new solution, than being like, I'm sorry, this is all my fault. And the challenge is again, when we talk about the energetics behind it, when we essentially play victim, this is all my fault, it narrows our scope and our ability, firstly, to take any action at all, because at level 1, there's no action to be taken. And then at level 2, we're just in a sort of fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, which again is just, we're just trying to avoid the pain. We're just trying to not lose. When we can climb up that ladder and get to a 5-6, which is like, oh, wow, this is a phenomenal challenge, which means there is an opportunity here. And I am going to commit myself to discovering that opportunity. We are eliminating a culture of avoidance. When apologies are shallow or even non-existent in your organization, that's where the blame culture breeds. And mistakes get swept under the rug. And you start having the same conversations over and over again. And you start seeing the same problems over and over again. And this then creates poor morale, decreased performance, and quiet quitting, where people just don't believe, like, even though you're talking about change all the time, you're talking about impact, it's not happening because everyone's so busy keeping up this facade. They're not actually looking at the true gaps, the true opportunities to improve. That, and I know I say this a lot, but anybody that works with me gets so annoyed because anytime they bring me a quote unquote problem, I'm like, oh yeah, that is an awesome opportunity. And it's like, it's kind of annoying. I get it. Okay. So I know what you're saying, BZ. We've been talking a lot about apologizing and over apologizing, and you get it. And it's a cultural phenomenon, which means it's not necessary. And you can be a very respected, very impactful, very empathetic member of your community, your life, your business, your team, whatever you want, without over apologizing. So actually, I'm going to start with why a meaningful apology is impactful, because again, some of the data and research out there made it so much more obvious and inspiring to really reach for the meaningful apology. So it's a signal for future behavior. A handful of studies demonstrated that apologies, when properly framed, act as a commitment to behavioral change. They're seen as more effective when they come with an implied promise to adjust behavior and accountability in terms of reinforcing the impact of this adjusted behavior. So a kick-ass apology is like, this is what I plan on doing, and I would appreciate your support and holding me accountable for it. So check in with me. Or let's, make a sign, or let's track it. Like working actually with the person or the group that you're apologizing to say, not only am I acknowledging that this is a problem, and I am going to change to ensure we don't experience this again, I would love your help in in supporting that change. And this is what I think it could look like. What do you think? Apologies reframe responsibility for both sides. This is where it gets really cool. Apologies can reshape how both parties view the situation. So the wronged party is more likely to find emotional closure and even reflect on their own response when a meaningful apology is given. And I know you've experienced this. When someone's apologized for something and it's actually unlocked a new level of understanding for you, and you've gone, oh, you know what? I actually wasn't on my A game either. And I got a little reactive and maybe took it a little personally. Now knowing your intention wasn't to hurt my feelings or to lump me with all of this responsibility, you actually had X, Y, or Z going on. So this had nothing to do with me. And I totally interpret it as a very direct and personal jibe. That's on me, right? So like I thought that was so cool. And I thought about, not only is a meaningful apology demonstrative of the type of culture and behavior you want to encourage, it can literally rewrite the experience for people. And that's what I think like climbing this energetic ladder can do, because now you're both at this win-win-win space. And then clearly it is a catalyst for emotional growth. So that's the end result, right? Emotional awareness is linked to our growth, and it shows that meaningful apologies increase this emotional intelligence. And so people who regularly reflect on their actions aren't habitually apologizing, but truly choosing, like, where is a sorry going to be useful? And where is a like, oh, hey, I just misspoke. No big deal. Or thank you so much for your patience in my response. That is a catchphrase you will hear me say quite a lot instead of sorry for the delay. Research found that people who offer genuine apologies experience better emotional regulation and self-growth over time. This confirms that apologies do lead to positive self-transformation when done intentionally, with meaning and purpose. So what does that actually look like, right? We're here. We're in the home stretch, my friend. So firstly, acknowledge the impact. And this is, I think, where we can acknowledge what's occurred. We can recognize what happened without an I'm sorry. Because oftentimes someone's having a really big feeling, and that's cool, man. They can have that feeling. It doesn't mean you did it, right? Focus on how your action or inaction affected others and just simply recognize it. What did I said I did this the other day. I had a client who was really, really upset with me and was honestly calling to fire me because they had interpreted a comment as being personal rather than reflective of a particular business activity. And I said, wow, it's unbelievable you've had to sit with this for the last few months and you've been this upset for that long. That is incredibly challenging and very heavy lifting. And you must be exhausted as a result. I can totally understand why you would be so upset right now. Now, they're mad at me and blaming me again for a comment they said I made. I may have made that comment. I don't remember any of this, to be perfectly honest. I remember the general discussion. It had to do with email marketing, and I said, look, I have my own opinions about somebody cold emailing me 5 times in a day. I also have issue with somebody saying they're going to follow up and then not. It's an ethical thing for me. And this was then interpreted as me calling them unethical. It doesn't matter. I said, wow. Like, I didn't say wow again because that's just for me trying to speak this through. If someone had called me unethical, I would also be deeply offended. If that's what occurred, 100%, you have my sincerest apologies. That was definitely not my intention. And I explained to them what I just explained to you. I have my own opinions about email marketing. I would honestly rather get spam calls than things in my inbox that I did not ask for. You've scraped my email from a website and now you're sending me 15 emails where you're pretending to be my friend and you're putting "re" in the subject line. And I've never invited this nor asked for it. And that's my thing. So I would have been using a metaphor. It's not really a metaphor, actually. It's like a very direct experience that I am relating. Which is what I was doing. And they said, oh, so you didn't call me unethical. And I was like, It's pretty unusual that I would do that in a client session. Also, my whole understanding of ethics is you do you, boo. So again, like if that's what happened, my bad. And you have every right to be that upset. It completely de-escalated their experience. And we're still working with each other today. I think that was it was a year ago that I upset them. It was about 9 months ago we had this conversation. Okay, so let's get back to how to apologize as a leader and impact and change maker. Impact change maker, sure. Acknowledge the impact, own the responsibility, clearly take responsibility for what went wrong without making excuses. If the issue is complex, acknowledge the factors, but take ownership of your role. Commit to fixing the problem. I think this is when someone's like, sorry, I've been busy all day. That's cool, man. You're supposed to be busy. You do not need to respond to my text message about what's happening on the weekend. Pair your apology with a solution. This shows that you're not just saying sorry, but taking action to improve the solution. Follow up. Once corrective actions have been made, check back in with those affected to demonstrate your continued commitment. That's it. 4 steps. Acknowledge, own it, commit to fixing the problem, follow up. Obviously, the second step is dependent on the fact that this is your thing to own. This isn't an episode on empathy, but it's very different when someone is just having a really big feeling. And I would encourage you to listen to, I've done a few episodes. I think the way that to really practice this is tactical empathy. And again, this isn't the episode on that. There are a few where I go through it. I will link to one of those in the show notes. But actually, that would probably be pretty useful if you are looking at negotiating and communicating with people in sort of high pressure situations and how you can employ tactical empathy. We'll link to that episode, and then definitely link to the episode on leadership if this is something that you want to take further, and how can you really show up as a leader who is able to hold space for conflict and for doubt and for fear and potentially for that victimization and vulnerability we all experience. How do you lead through that, especially if you're being affected by it by yourself? So two different resources there for you. I mean, it's clear meaningful and thoughtful apologies in personal settings is incredibly valuable. Building a culture of trust and accountability strengthens your authority, your influence, your respect. It enhances your company's reputation. And this isn't just about resolving conflict or social lubricant or some hierarchy of expectations you are obligated to meet. This is about long-term growth. And, you hear a lot of people talk about growth mindset. There's a huge difference between avoiding conflict and embracing a challenge. And so this will foster stronger relationships. This will build more cohesive and trustworthy workplaces. So when you are managing change, acknowledging where and what went wrong and how it's going to be adjusted and checking back in with that process is going to be the difference between long-term sustainable success and not really believing it's going to get done. So anywho, I think that's all I have to say about that. What time is it? I have a client right now. Oh my God, I timed that perfectly. Amazing. Okay, so thank you so much for being here. You know where to find me, NicoleBZ.com. The BZ bot has taken over my social media. We are BZ botting. So we're looking at all the data and analytics. So if you see things going up and then disappearing and then going up and then disappearing, we're just having a fun little game playing with the algo. And this is one of the best places is just listen to the podcast or watch it on YouTube. The loop is my most favorite place to play. I have to admit it's been fire recently. And again, the feedback has been amazing. But I launched an Artist's Way little support group. So we're on week 5 right now. You're more than welcome to join. You can watch all of the videos and catch up and just kind of do the work. If you're familiar with the Artist's Way, it's free. It's literally just come as you are, super casual. Psychic Profit Squad. Oh, I'm doing that tomorrow. That's another fun one. That's just an ongoing support group for anybody in finance, interested in finance, whether it's personal or business. We just do a monthly power hour to create predictable profits. It's pretty great. So yeah, I'm swapping all the things over in the back end. It's been 18 months. I've been holding my breath for this one. So if any links don't work or things like that, just email hello@NicoleBZ.com. I can't wait to hear from you. I love creating content for you. Let me know if you've got any questions or if there's anything I can support you with. And I'll see you next week. Thank you for being here. I love you.